All right, so have you ever heard of Sapona? He's a god in African mythology,
Oh, yeah.
and he's said to embody like a virus that was so deadly it, really messed up the continent thousands of years ago.
Wow.
And, the imagery is pretty wild. Like, it's the sickness that blinds you, blood coming out of your eyes. Pretty gruesome.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that this myth um, might actually be based on, like, a real thing.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking about smallpox.
Oh, wow.
Smallpox is a disease that, it killed over 350 million people,
Wow.
which is more than any other disease in history.
Yeah, that's not just a scary story. That's a reminder that
Yeah.
viruses can really mess things up.
Totally. And it's interesting because a sculpture of Sapona was actually displayed in the World Health Organization building.
Oh, wow.
It was made of, like, shells and even human hair.
That's kind of creepy, but also really interesting.
Yeah.
How can something as tiny as a virus, take down civilizations?
That's a great question. It's all about strategy, right?
Yeah.
Think about your immune system like a fortress. Your skin, that's the outer wall.
Okay, yeah.
Your mucous membranes, those keep the invaders out for the most part.
That's the first line of defense then.
Exactly.
What about if a germ, gets past that?
Well, then your body's got to, sound the alarm.
Right.
Specialized cells, they're like the first responders.
Yeah.
Go to the scene,
Mm-hmm.
trigger inflammation, fever, things like that.
So that buys some time.
Exactly. Got to slow down that virus, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like turning up the heat to slow down a time bomb.
Okay.
It buys time for the big guns.
So when we get a fever, it's not the virus making us sick, it's our body fighting back.
That's exactly it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's where the T cells and the B cells, the special forces, come in, right? They're developed like targeted weapons
Oh, wow.
against the virus.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So how did smallpox, get to be so bad if our bodies are so good at fighting back?
Well, smallpox is a master manipulator.
Okay.
And this is where the idea of the triangle balance comes in.
Okay.
Viruses, they balance on like a 3-point scale.
Okay.
How deadly they are, how easily they spread, and how much they mutate.
So a virus can be really deadly or really contagious or always changing, but it can't be all three.
You got it.
Huh. Yeah.
Smallpox was really, really good at being lethal and at spreading, so it didn't really need to mutate that much.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
That actually would be its downfall later on,
Okay.
but we'll get to that.
Okay.
For now, let's rewind a little bit, okay?
Okay.
Let's see how humans started fighting back against this tiny little enemy way before we had, modern medicine.
Well, we're talking ancient wisdom here.
Exactly.
People have been dealing with this for a long time, and they figured out ways to fight back without, all the stuff we have now.
That's right.
Take the Ming Dynasty in China, for example.
Yeah, that's a great example because it shows just how ingrained smallpox was in everyday life. Even military strategy was affected by it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I gotta hear this.
So imagine this. You've got 200,000 Qing Dynasty soldiers, right?
Okay.
And they're getting ready to attack this city, Ningyuan.
All right.
They're ready to strike, but they hesitate.
200,000 soldiers. What could make them hesitate?
It was winter,
Okay.
and they were terrified of smallpox.
Right.
They knew that it was less active in the cold,
Oh, wow.
so they waited.
Wow, so they were really scared of this virus.
Yeah, it was a big deal. Even Emperor Shunzi, he is a powerful ruler, but even he wasn't immune.
What happened?
He lost his wife to smallpox,
Oh.
and then he died from it too, tragically.
That's all. It seemed like smallpox was everywhere back then.
It really was.
Did anybody try to fight back against it?
Well, Emperor Kangxi, he was Shunzi's successor.
Okay.
He actually got smallpox as a child, and he survived.
Oh, wow.
And that experience, it really changed how he ruled.
Okay.
He decided to do something really groundbreaking.
What was that?
He implemented vaccination practices, like, all over the place.
Wow.
And even put it into, like, ancestral law.
So he was ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time. He knew that prevention on a large scale was super important.
That's incredible. It really makes you realize how important, the government is for public health.
It's crucial.
Even today, or maybe especially today, but smallpox, it wasn't just Asia, it was everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Smallpox was a global problem. It left its mark on, continents and cultures.
Yeah.
And it really changed the course of history.
It's amazing how interconnected everything is.
It really is.
Smallpox, it really was a global problem.
Oh, yeah. It definitely went global, and it really left its mark on, continents, cultures. I mean, it really changed the course of history.
Yeah, it's amazing how interconnected things are, how something that happened over there could affect things over here.
It really...
And speaking of impact, let's talk about 18th century America
Okay.
and what happened with Native American populations.
Yeah, that's a really tragic example
Yeah.
of what can happen when you have a disease that spreads really easily and it encounters people who've, never seen it before.
It's easy to forget that, history is connected like that
Right.
something like a virus could have such a huge impact all over the globe.
Yeah, and it really shows how important it is for, the whole world to work together to
Yeah.
deal with these kinds of things, even today, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of working together, let's talk about, one of the biggest wins in like medical history,
Okay.
getting rid of smallpox completely.
Yeah.
That wasn't just luck. That took, I don't know, years and years of people like figuring things out and working together.
Absolutely. It was a huge effort. Took centuries of, watching, experimenting. People really had to work at it.
Yeah, and this is where our friend Edward Jenner comes in, right? The father of immunology.
That's the one.
So tell me about his work.
So Jenner, he was a smart guy, and he noticed something interesting.
Okay.
Milkmaids, the people who, milk cows,
Yeah.
they would sometimes get cowpox,
Okay.
which is kind of like smallpox, but not as bad.
Okay.
And these milkmaids, they seem to be, like, immune to smallpox.
Really?
Yeah, they'd get a little sick, but then they were fine.
That's wild. So they got a little bit sick and it protected them from the really bad stuff.
Exactly. It's like their bodies learned how to fight it off.
Wow.
And Jenner, he was building on, centuries of, like, Chinese practices, and he had this idea.
Okay, what if?
What if you could, like, give someone cowpox on purpose?
Okay.
Would that protect them from smallpox?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so instead of using, like, a weakened version of smallpox,
Right.
he's thinking maybe there's a safer way.
Right.
And it turned out he was right. It was a huge breakthrough.
This is big.
In 1796, he did this experiment.
Okay.
He took a young boy,
Oh, boy.
and he basically gave him cowpox.
Okay.
And then, a few weeks later, he exposed the boy to smallpox, and guess what?
What?
The boy was fine.
No.
Yeah, Jenner's work, it was like a turning point.
Wow. So this one experiment helped to get rid of a disease that had been around for like ever.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it took a long time, but it started there. People started doing more research, more vaccination.
You like that?
And finally, in 1980, the World Health Organization, they said, that's it. Smallpox is gone.
That's incredible.
It's a huge testament to, human ingenuity and collaboration.
Yeah, to get rid of something that had been around for that long, that's amazing, but
Uh-oh, there's a but.
there's always a but, right? We said that smallpox was eradicated in 1980.
Right, we did.
But just a year later, something happened in Birmingham, England that really shook things up.
Yeah, the case of Jeanette,
Okay.
it was a stark reminder that, even when we think we've got things figured out, the microbial world, it can still surprise us.
So who is Jeanette? What happened?
So Jeanette, she was a young photographer living in Birmingham,
Okay.
and it all started with, what seemed like normal symptoms, nothing too serious at first.
Right.
But then she got worse, and people started to think, wait a minute, could this be smallpox?
Oh, no. That's like the worst nightmare.
Yeah, it was a mad dash to, quarantine Jeanette and anyone she'd been in contact with.
Right.
They didn't want an outbreak.
Of course not. And did it work?
Well, they tried their best, but tragically, the virus, it spread to Jeanette's mother,
Oh, no.
and even worse to her father, and he didn't make it.
That's terrible. So it really was smallpox. How is that even possible? I thought it was gone.
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Officially, the story was that the virus, it didn't come back naturally.
Okay.
But the thing with Jeanette's case is, it didn't really add up. It felt like there was more to it.
Okay, so what else happened?
Well, shortly after Jeanette was diagnosed, a virologist, he was working in a lab right below where Jeanette worked.
Okay.
He died by suicide.
Oh, wow. That's suspicious.
Yeah, and to make it even weirder, his suicide note, it just said, sorry, I failed myself.
That's chilling. It makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was some kind of accident and the virus got out.
It's a theory, and it's been talked about a lot, but nothing's ever been proven.
Right.
But it raises some important questions about, keeping samples of these really dangerous viruses around.
Yeah, like, is it worth the risk?
Exactly. It's a tough call. On the one hand, having those samples, it could be really useful. If there's ever another outbreak, we could use them to make new vaccines, treatments, things like that.
That makes sense.
But as long as they're out there, there's always a chance, however small, that something could go wrong.
Yeah, that's scary.
It's a balancing act, for sure.
So we got to be really careful.
We do.
You know, thinking about all this, it reminds me of Sapona.
Oh, yeah.
The myth, it's easy to think of it as just a story,
Right.
but the way they describe it, the blindness, the marks on the skin, it's like almost like they knew, like a warning from the past.
It's interesting how these myths, they often reflect, real fears, real things that people were going through.
Right, it's like a reminder that nature can be really powerful.
Yeah, and that we're not always in control.
Even with all our technology, all our advancements, we're still vulnerable.
We are, and that's why it's so important to understand these things, these viruses, how they work, how they spread.
So we can protect ourselves
Exactly.
and future generations.
Exactly.
You know, it's kind of amazing to think about a virus, something so small you can't even see it, and it's had such a huge impact on everything.
I know, right?
Our history, the world we live in, it's incredible.
It really is. And it just shows you everything's connected,
Mhm.
our bodies, global events, even the stories we tell.
Speaking of stories, let's go back to Sapona for a second.
Okay.
That myth, it's easy to say, oh, it's just a story, but when you think about the details, the blindness, the pox marks, it's almost like a warning from the past, you know?
I see what you mean. It's like those ancient storytellers, they were trying to make sense of this horrible disease, smallpox.
Right, and they use stories to do that.
Exactly. It's a way of remembering, a cultural memory, if you will.
Yeah, like they're saying, hey, nature's powerful, don't forget that.
And Sapona, the virus, it's like the embodiment of that power.
Exactly. It makes you realize, even with all our science, all our progress, we're still a part of nature.
We are. And we're not always in control.
We've got to be prepared. We've got to understand how these things work, how they spread.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The more we know, the better we can protect ourselves.
Right. And future generations, too.
Exactly. We can't make the same mistakes again.
So as we move forward, maybe we should take another look at those old myths.
You think so?
I do. There might be some wisdom there, something we can learn from about our place in the world, about respecting nature.
Yeah, maybe those old stories, they have something to teach us after all.
It's been quite a journey, this deep dive into smallpox.
It has.
Devastation, resilience, ancient myths, incredible scientific discoveries. It's all connected.
It really is.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop learning.
That's what it's all about.
We'll see you next time.